and welcome to the Buckeye Business Builders Monthly Lunch and Learn. I'm Kent ILER with ILER Networking and Computing, and we are your hosts for this event. And we will have a recording of this event available on our YouTube channel as well, which I'm going to copy over to the chat window here, so you'll have a copy of that. So hold on a second while I multitask and do that here. So right now in the chat window, you should have a copy of the link to our YouTube page. All right. Our mission at Buckeye Business Builders is to cultivate a dynamic and supportive business community in Northeast Ohio. We're committed to connecting local professionals, fostering valuable relationships, and providing opportunities for growth and success. Through networking, collaboration, and education, we aim to empower business and contribute to the economic vitality of our region. So we meet the second and fourth Tuesday from 11:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. at the Northern Ohio Business Center, or the NOBC, located at Cobblestone Square at 5224 Cobblestone Road in Sheffield Village, Ohio, which is right across the parking lot from Sam's Club. We'd love to have you join us in person for these events. For more information, come check out our website at bbbng.org. That's BBB for Buckeye Business Builders Networking Group.org. So today we're going to be covering an overview of compliance and the changes that came on for 2025. So let me share my screen and we'll get started with that. All right, so there are several compliance frameworks that we're going to cover, and there have been critical updates that you would need to know about that came into effect in 2025. So today we're just going to go through a high-level overview of each of those, and then we have deep dives for each of these that we're going to schedule. We have scheduled starting next month and going all the way to October. And so you'll see the dates for those. But without further ado, let me give you a background of who ILER Networking and Computing is and what we do. So ILER Networking and Computing, we are a managed services and security provider, and we're celebrating 31 years in business this year. So we've been around for a while. Our headquarters are here in Sheffield Village, Ohio, but we have branches in Iowa and South Carolina. So we do fully managed IT, which means we are the IT department for small to mid-sized businesses that want to outsource IT. But for larger companies or companies that do have an IT department, we do co-manage, which that means we assist companies with the IT department with the solutions they need for cybersecurity, for compliance, and other things relating to IT. So one thing that separate us is we always answer the phones live during working hours. There's no auto attendance. If you call us Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., you're going to get a live person answering the phone there. We have assurance service plans that will fit your IT needs. Every company is a little bit different. So we can customize these plans for exactly what you need to make sure that you're protected from your IT standpoints. We also offer compliance as a service, and that's where today's webinar is going to come in, talking about the different compliance aspects. So one of the awards we've recently nominated for was the MSP Titans of the Industry Award. We were one of 10 companies that are MSPs worldwide, and we had a gala out in Beverly Hills, California. So that was a great event and honor just for the level of excellence that we provide for our clients. So without further ado, let's talk about compliance changes. So for today's agenda, we're going to look at what the compliance landscape and how that's changed for 2025. And there's several different frameworks that we want to talk to. There's PCI framework that's going to be for anyone using credit cards. HIPAA security rule that's going to be with anyone in the healthcare industry. FTC safeguards rule if you do anything with financial client money. And then NIST CSF and CIS controls our information. Ohio, Iowa, and South Carolina are all safe harbor states if your company is NIST CSF compliant or CIS compliant. And so that gives you a level of protection and also make sure that you're doing your due diligence for cybersecurity. And CJIS is your criminal justice information system. So we have multiple law enforcement agencies that we support, and there have been new updates for those as well. We're going to do a cross-framework analysis, talk about the commonality between these changes, and then what that business impact in the solutions for you. So again, this is used to educate you, and so you're well aware of what type of impact you have for these changes. Now, in GoToWebinar, there's a little question mark at the top. If you have any questions, click on that, and at the end, I'm going to go through and answer those questions for you. So understanding compliance. First of all, what is compliance? Compliance means following laws, regulations, and industry standards designed to protect sensitive information and ensure secure operations. So it's not just a requirement, it's a critical business strategy that protects your organization and creates competitive advantages. So most business owners, I've been doing this for 31 years, and there's a lot of business owners that will do what is required, but if it's going to bring on extra work or an extra cost, a lot of business owners do not want to do that. And that's where compliance comes out, because it's enforcing what is supposed to be done in order to make sure that you're protecting your sensitive client data. And so that's why we have these different compliance requirements. So what is the cost if you decide to choose not to be compliant? Because that is a choice. Data breaches are an option if you do take your, what these compliance changes are doing are helping you to increase your cybersecurity and making sure that your data is protected. And so without following this compliance, you're going to be more susceptible to data breaches. And so that would be a system compromise that exposes sensitive information. You've heard on the news over the past decade of large data breaches from large companies like AT&T, Home Depot, Target. And that's where a hacker got in and got access to their customer information. Some of them had access to Social Security numbers if you had a credit card with that company. And so there are some large fines and fees if you have sensitive information and there's a data breach. There's financial penalties there, especially for HIPAA. It can be from $100 up to $50,000 per violation. Or for PCI DSS, for people that companies that use credit cards, it can be up to $500,000 per incident. So these are serious matters. Besides just the fines and fees, there's reputation damage. There's loss of client trust. When you see someone that's been involved in a data breach and that's made public news, does that make you think, hey, do I really want to be doing business with this client? There's a lot of clients that or companies that go through some type of incident, a cyber incident, whether it's ransomware or a data breach like that, and then they have a falling out from their clients because of that. It's a loss of trust. And then there's operational disruption. Something that we've seen over the last year and a half is all the organizations that are in a supply chain are being asked by the main vendors there. For example, in this area, we have Heinen's supermarkets, and they're reaching out to their suppliers to make sure that they're doing their due diligence for cybersecurity. Because if one of their suppliers they depend on in the supply chain have a data breach, an incident like this, they could be down for weeks, and that really impacts the ability for Heinen's to rely on the products that they need to sell to their customers. So this is something that is becoming very upfront and visible in the supply chain area. But don't think of it as a bad thing. Again, we can transform compliance into a strategic advantage. So the ones we're going to talk about are PCI DSS. Again, if you take credit cards with your company, this is a requirement for you. There's HIPAA, which is for healthcare companies, for NIST CSF, and CIS. Those are both optional ones that if you choose to do that, the state of Ohio, the state of Iowa, and the state of South Carolina, along with many other states, but those are the states we're in, offer you a safe harbor in case you do have a breach, because unfortunately there's nothing that can be done 100% to keep you protected, but this shows that you've done your due diligence, and they will limit any fines or fees that come against you in the case of a data breach. CJIS is the Criminal Justice Data Protection Standards for law enforcement agencies, and then FTC Safeguards, which is security rules for anyone handling client finances. So by following these, you get a competitive advantage that shows that your company demonstrates the professionalism and accountability to your clients. There are different badges that you can put on your website that shows that you are compliant with all of these frameworks. It aligns with the security best practices. And the whole reason that all these compliance frameworks have come out with updates is because the cybersecurity landscape has changed drastically. And we see more attacks. Just look at the news, and shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. And so they've updated the frameworks to make sure that clients and companies are doing what they're supposed to be doing in order to protect that data. So there are record high penalties. There's Heightened regulatory response, and again, FTC safeguards. When we talk about anyone dealing with client finances, it's not just banks, but auto dealers that are dealing with auto loans, colleges and universities that deal with student loans, CPAs, financial advisors, et cetera. All of them have to deal with FTC safeguards. So it's important to make sure that you know what compliance requirements your company has to be compliant with, and you get compliant and maintain compliance through there. One of the statements I've made, over the past year is 2025 compliance updates represent the most significant regulatory shift we've seen in my 31 years in information security. So organizations unprepared for these changes face unprecedented risk. So it's super important. Make sure you're protecting yourselves through this. So let's look at what changed in PCI DSS. So this is anyone that's dealing with credit card information. The deadline for this was March 31st. That's already gone. And so there are 54 requirements that have become mandatory. So I've just highlighted the top ones here, but you've got to do multi-factor authentication that's required for all cardholder data environment access points, no exceptions. There's a lot of companies that think, well, I'm using Stripe or I'm using Square, all my credit card information is done in the cloud, so they take care of that for me. The computers that you use to access those environments also have to be PCI compliant as well. Payment page script security. This is any type of script that's going to be handling the payment processing. For example, websites. When you go to your website and if you accept credit cards on there, then you have to make sure that the payment page script security is a part of that. Password requirements used to be 7 characters long. Now they have to be 12 or longer with complexity and rotation controls. Enhanced intrusion detection. If you've been doing PCI for a while, you realize that your payment processor has someone handling the PCI compliant on their side, and they will do an exterior scan to make sure once a quarter that they don't find any vulnerabilities in there. The new changes for PCI DSS 4.0.1 requires internal and external vulnerability scans. So this is something that's new. You have to have your IT provider do an internal scan and show proof of the scan of what the results are. If anything was found, that those have been remediated as well. And then the last one I want to cover today is file integrity monitoring. So this is continuing monitoring of the payment pages for unauthorized modifications. You may have heard at ATMs where people put a scanner on in front of where you put your ATM card, and it actually copies the information, and then when it feeds back out, the people don't even know that their information's been stolen. People that hack into websites do the same thing. They can put a script on that website, and so when you're completing that transaction, they've just captured everything that you're transmitting that you thought securely to your credit card processor, but now that's in the bad guy's hands. And so making sure that these files have not been tampered with is super important, and you've got to have tools to do that. When you do have a detection like that, we open up a ticket and can fix it and make sure that any vulnerabilities have been remediated. HIPAA. So this HIPAA security rule is something that was proposed January 6th of this year. The final rule is expected later this year, but it has not been finalized yet. So the Department of Health and Human Services handles all HIPAA requirements. And basically, they've come up with several different aspects of that. So mandatory security testing, you have to have annual penetration testing. And then every 6 months, you've got to do vulnerability scanning, which is both internal and exterior as well. You've got to do your enhanced authentication. Again, multi-factor authentication required for anything that has personal private information, healthcare information. That's the ePHI access point. So that's basically your computers if you're going to be accessing details into that. And then cyber resilience. They want you to have a plan in place. So for within 72 hours after a cyber attack, you can be back up and running in business. And your asset management, you've got to have a comprehensive IT asset inventory and network mapping required. And anytime this changes, you've got to do updates with that. And when we look at later on here, the NIST CSF, part of that is how you do the plans for after an attack comes in. So you're prepared for handling those types of things. Again, the penalty impact, if you realize that you're HIPAA compliant, which I think everyone in the healthcare industry does, but they find out that you're not, especially if you have a breach, then those violations have ranged from $137 all the way over to $2 million based on what that violation is and what type of data. So it is a very significant issue. So FTC safeguards. So I've got a list here of the different companies that do have to be compliant for the FTC safeguards. These came out over a year ago, and still I find a lot of different companies that fall under this do not realize that. So mortgage lenders and brokers, payday lenders, auto dealers offering financing, finance companies, check cashers, tax preparation services, investment advisors, CPAs, colleges and universities. And so a lot of them, because they're not a banker, don't realize they qualify as financial institutions based on what the FTC requires. So the things that you have to do, we actually have a 9-page or a guide for the 9 steps to be compliant for FTC safeguards. And so it's something you can do on your own, and you can reach out to us. We'll give you a link to that site, and it gives you what the information is. You can also go to the FTC or Google the FTC safeguards rule. And it's going to take you, what are these 9 steps? So you have to have someone that's responsible for overseeing that, and they're the ones that will be responsible. This can be someone internally, or it can be a third party, such as ILER Networking and Computing. The point is, whoever is responsible for that, if there's an issue, they're the ones that take the responsibility for that. So you have to basically notify if you have, within 30 days, if you have a breach where over 500 customers or more have been affected. Again, multi-factor authentication for all customer information access. We're seeing multi-factor authentication is a strong deterrent in case you have credentials that have been compromised. The multi-factor authentication can help prevent them from actually getting into that data. Excuse me, gotta get a drink. So data management, you've got to have a complete data inventory and classification of all customer information in your environment. And then encryption. There has to be mandatory encryption for customer data, both in transit and at rest. So at rest means when it's sitting there in your databases, on your servers, on your workstations. And transit means when you're communicating that to possibly a system in the cloud. All of that information has to be encrypted. And then security testing. We've got to have regular penetration testing and vulnerability assessments. So we've seen that with PCI. We've seen that with HIPAA as well. And again, with FTC safeguards, that's one of the requirements. So NIST security, NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. It's a government organization. And in February of 2024, they released the second version of the NIST CSF, which stands for the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. And so there are 6 pillars to this. There's govern, which is a new function that came out in 2024 that's establishing the cybersecurity as a board level responsibility. It's not just for the IT department. The second pillar is to identify. It's enhanced asset risk and supply chain management. Basically, you've got to understand and identify where are the points that could be hit by cybersecurity attacks. And then after you've identified them, the next pillar is to protect them. Strengthen your access control and data security measures. In access control, one of the features they're going to say is multi-factor authentication. But what's interesting about this is the last 3 things are for what you do after you have an attack. So detect. You have continuous monitoring and anomaly detection, so you can detect the bad guys when they get in. And then respond. You've got to have an incident response plan already set up, so it's not, after the bad guys get in and you're dealing with this, that's not the time to come up figuring out, okay, what am I going to do? You have to have policies in place. And so, okay, we know what to do now. We've gone through these tabletop exercises and practice, how we're going to respond to this event. And then you recover so you can get back on your feet again and continue operating like you need to be doing. But I know here in the Cleveland, Ohio area, the city of Cleveland was shut down for over 10 days last year. Columbus was shut down for over 10 days. Last month, the Lorain County had a shutdown due to a cyber incident as well. And so these costs some significant issues. Right now, we're dealing with something with one of our distributors. Last Thursday, they got hit with ransomware. And so fortunately, we have multiple distributors, but we cannot place any orders right now through that channel because they are recovering from the cyber attack. And so that's where you can see from the supply chain, if they were our only distributor, we wouldn't be able to place any orders. Last year, there's a company called CDK Global that handled 80% of the automobile industry software, and they got hacked with ransomware. They were down for multiple weeks. They estimated globally it cost businesses over $1 billion, And CDK ended up paying $25 million to get the data, the ransomware released. The issue with that is more than likely there's a backdoor. And so unless they completely wipe their systems to do recovery, there's a high probability that that company that did the ransomware will be back. CIS controls is very similar to NIST CSF. So CIS is from the Center for Internet Security, and there's a lot of changes that align between CIS 8.1 and NIST CSF 2.0. The purpose, again, that they've done these updates is to address emerging threat vectors. So the controls continue to provide practical, prioritized actions that organizations can implement to improve their security posture. And so off to the right, you see the pyramid here, and these implementation groups provide a practical way to prioritize CIS control implementations. So no matter what your size is, everyone should be doing at least IG1. And again, similar things are in this CSF, so you don't have to do both, but there is a high level of overview there. So for organizations with dedicated IT security and staff, IG2 is good, and then for advanced controls for organizations with specialized security teams, IG3, they've got levels for those as well. All right, CGIS for all law enforcement entities and anyone dealing with law enforcement, for example, police departments, sheriff departments, court systems, prosecutors' offices, public defenders, criminal justice vendors, and IT providers to these entities need to be CGIS certified. And so CGIS is the Criminal Justice Information System, and they created some significant changes as well this year that have gone through. And so phishing resistant MFA, supply chain risk management, extended personnel security, and continuous monitoring. We've heard of these before. So again, one of the things we're seeing for our law enforcement agencies, they actually have to do a multi-factor authentication that is not phone-based. You cannot use one of the software-based ones on your phone. So we have USB keys that every employee has to be assigned, and that has to be inserted into the computer when they log in order to give them access to that secure information. And so there's a lot of requirements that have come up. Unfortunately, these do cause clients to many times invest more in solutions that will help them meet these compliance. So let's look at the cross-framework analysis. So basically multi-factor authentication, you've heard about that across all frameworks without exception. And CGIS and NIST CSF specifically are requiring phishing resistant methods. For supply chain security and enhanced vendor risk management, requiring assessments, monitoring, and contractual safeguards. Meaning if you're going to do business with other companies in your supply chain, they're going to require you contractually to make sure you're doing your due diligence. And we have seen this with many of our clients already. Continuous monitoring. You've got to have real-time threat detection and security monitoring that goes beyond periodic assessments. Governance integration, board-level cybersecurity oversight with executive accountability for security outcomes. That means if you have a data breach or some type of data attack, the board level and those executive levels are going to be accountable. FTC safeguards actually, if the executive team is aware of that and chooses to not become FTC compliant, they can actually impose jail time for the executive team there. Asset management, just complete technology visibility. So inventory, classification, ownership, knowing what information's on your network and what vulnerabilities those could provide. We've had several clients that have gone out and purchased home-based routers because the Wi-Fi doesn't work maybe well in a certain area. And so they plug this into this network. Well, what they've just done is open up a security hole in the network. And so you've got to make sure that everything that's on the network is approved by your IT department. And then incident response, 72-hour recovery standards are becoming the norm across multiple frameworks. And again, the regular testing. So you've heard me say lots and lots, very similar things over all of these. But again, it's to help protect your company, protect your data, make sure you're not one of these companies that shut down for days, if not weeks. So the convergence effect, one of the most significant developments is the alignment between these major frameworks. Now, NIST CSF and CIS are both very similar, so that makes sense. But when we talk about CGIS and PCI and HIPAA, those are very different frameworks for very different industries, but we are seeing this convergence where they're doing the same type of requirements that are through that. And so again, what's the cost of non-compliance? For HIPAA, we've seen that getting over $2 million per incident. For PCI DSS, that can be over $10,000 monthly, pretty significant. I'm not going to talk about GDPR, but they've got some major ones over there as well. And FTC safeguards, typical is several $100,000. So beyond direct penalties, the fines and fees you pay, the payment processing revocation. So you could lose the ability to handle credit cards for PCI DSS violations. Mandatory breach notification. That's when you have to notify your customers that, hey, we had a breach, and that's going to impact their trust in doing business with you. Securities litigation for publicly traded companies. Director and officer liability for governance failures. Again, for FTC safeguards, if you were known about it and choose to not do it, you could end up in jail. Customer churn following security incidents, and then operational disruption. I mean, think about the city of Cleveland that was down for 10 days. Right now, we've a week ago is when our distributor got hit with ransomware, or one of our distributors, and we still can't place orders through there. And so that is definitely disrupting our business. Fortunately, we have backups and other distributors that we can go through. So the compliance challenge, this is very new to many of you. That's why we want to do this educational series on compliance. And, so there's the framework overlap, the expertise gaps. Most companies that we deal with, even if they have an IT department, they're not working day to day in compliance and realizing what these changes are. We have teams of people at ILER Networking and Computing that focus on what the changes are, making sure that we're knowledgeable, and then we can educate. And for those companies that use us to do compliance as a service, we can handle those compliance requirements that they have. There's new tools that we have. And again, we can come in and even do board level reporting if that's a desire. So if you decide compliance is not something you want to handle, we have managed compliance benefits. And so here's just some of the benefits you can get when you partner with the effort. So expert knowledge. We keep up with all these compliance frameworks that we've talked about today, and there are continuous changes. PCI changes typically every couple of years. HIPAA has new regulations out, sometimes more frequently than once a year. And so we take an integrated approach. We have coordinated compliance programs addressing multiple frameworks simultaneously. So if you're a medical office, let's just say a doctor's office that takes credit cards, you've got to be HIPAA compliant, you've got to be PCI compliant for the credit cards. And if you want to be covered by the Ohio Safe Harbor protection, then you have to be NIST CSF compliant. So there's 3 different frameworks that will help you with that. The nice thing is there's so much overlap there. Once you become compliant with one, it's much easier to get compliant with the other ones that are required. Again, continuous monitoring. You need to have 24/7 threat level monitoring, compliance verification to ensure ongoing adherence to requirements. At 2 o'clock in the morning, if someone overseas starts and actually breaches your systems, you want someone there manned to be able to detect that and shut it down immediately. If you're operating between there and your IT department comes in at 9 o'clock in the morning, that hacker, that intruder could be well throughout your entire system, in those hours that have passed. So you don't want to give them that opportunity. And then documentation excellence. All of these things, we have to have comprehensive policies. We have to ensure that your employees have seen the policies and have acknowledged they've seen them and accepted. If you get audited or you have a data breach, it's important to be able to go back through quarterly and say that you have proof that you have been compliant. Otherwise, they're going to fine you for not being compliant. All right, so if you take credit cards, immediate action is required if you're not PCI compliant. So again, back in March 31st, 2025, these requirements came into place. If you hire us, within 30 days, we'll do a comprehensive gap analysis across your application frameworks. We'll prioritize PCI DSS if you're handling payment information. We'll start your inventory and network mapping, review incident response procedures, and assess your current MFA implementation. Then within 90 days, we'll implement enhanced authentication. And so if you need to have a change to your MFA or how you're authenticating, we'll give you the solution and be able to get that implemented. Develop supply chain risk management. You need to contact with the people you depend on for your supply chain. So if they get hit, you're not going to be waiting and not be able to supply what you need to for your customers. We'll establish continuous monitoring, update policies and procedures, and then schedule professional penetration testing that goes on continuously, ongoing. And then within 180 days, you'll have your completed PCI DSS 4.01 implementation. We'll conduct those tabletop exercises for incident response. Basically, we sit down with key players in your business and we go through a process just like, hey, you just got hacked. What do we do? And go through that process. And that just helps if you do have an incident in the future, you know exactly what you've done and you've already gone through that process. We implement board level compliance reporting. We prepare for HIPAA security rule changes because those are going to be finalized this year, and then establish ongoing compliance management program. So compliance is not a one and done. It's something that you get compliant and then you maintain compliance. And it's super important. If that's not very obvious that you do this, and we can help with that. So we can have multi-framework expertise. We've talked about PCI DSS, HIPAA, FTC safeguards, NIST CSF, CIS, and CGIS frameworks. And so our managed services and security is already doing continuous 24/7 monitoring for that. But the tools that we've had to bring in over the last year and a half have been significant so that we can help find gaps that we didn't have to watch for before. And this helps from Microsoft 365 to your local environment to any cloud providers that you're using. We have to make sure that any systems you're tying to is done securely through there. And then if you do end up getting an audit, we'll have comprehensive evidence collection and representation that we will help during any type of audits that you have to face. So again, why choose us? ILER Networking and Computing, regulatory currency. We maintain up to date all the requirements that you may need based on this framework we talked about. It's going to give you risk reduction so you can sleep easier. You can focus on running your business, not making sure that you're compliant, because it is time intensive. Resource optimization. There's significant cost savings when you can show that you are compliant, especially with cyber liability policies. If you show that you're following these compliance and are compliant, then you can work with your insurance agent to get a reduction in those insurance costs. And especially not having to deal with any fines or fees is a cost savings as well. Efficiency through integration. So we have a unified approach addressing multiple frameworks simultaneously, so we can easily get you compliant with anything that you need. Our systems have the documentation and it's ready for you, especially if you run into a situation where you have a breach or an audit come up. And again, with us doing this, being in this industry for 31 years, we have the expertise and experience to make sure we do things right. So we'll give you a peace of mind. So these are some questions and discussions that you need to discuss on your own, and that can help you maybe understand, should we reach out to ILER Networking and Computing for any of these compliance frameworks? So your framework applicability, which compliance frameworks impact your organization? Do you know that? If you don't, you need to be doing research to figure out what you have to be compliant with. What are your biggest compliance challenges or pain points? Most of our clients, it's basically having someone dedicated for this. They have other jobs and they just don't have the time required to put into getting the organization compliant. There's resource constraints. Again, same thing I just covered. Timeline pressures. You know, you've got to, again, for PCI DSS, you were required to be compliant back in March. If you're not compliant today, you're already not there. So if you have a data breach or an audit, that's not going to go well for you. So additional discussion points, you know, figure out if you don't have a compliance budget, get that, and then figure out how you can measure your ROI on that investment. Think about what the cost is if you have the data breach. Again, for an incident response, have you experienced any compliance incidents or audit findings? What were the lessons learned? And how well do your current security tools integrate? Traditionally, again, 5 years ago, we were fine just having, you know, an endpoint detection response antivirus on computers, and that would protect you. That's not possible today to do it. We've got to do DNS controls. We have to do monitoring of even like Microsoft 365 in the cloud to look for vulnerabilities that came in through there. And your biggest vulnerability for any type of cyber event is your employees. So we offer staff training. So we do phishing training, and then we also do phish testing. So just like kids do in school, you learn the material, but then you have to take a test afterwards. And so we can go through and make sure that your staff is ready by doing simulated phishing and see if they click on things like that. So you can reach out to us and we can help with any questions you've got. We are also doing a special initial compliance assessment for you. It's valued at $5,000. And for anyone that attended this, we'll give that to you today for free. So we can help you see very specifically where you are from a compliance standpoint. We're also doing deep dive sessions in the future here. And so we've covered a lot of different compliances at a high level, but August 14th, we're going to do a deep dive and focus specifically on HIPAA. On August 28th, we're going to do a deep dive specifically on PCI compliance. On September 11th, we're going to do NIST, CSF, and CIS framework changes. On September 25th, the FTC safeguards rule. And then on October 9th, the CJIS security requirements. So if any of these pertain to you and you want to learn more just focused on those, feel free to reach out to us and sign up for one of these future deep dive sessions. We also have a compliance report. If you go to ILER.com/compliance-report or scan this QR code, this is going to be a free report that gives you additional information that you can use in meeting your compliance needs. So again, just an overview. 2025, we've seen unprecedented changes to what the compliance requirements are because we've seen unprecedented changes in what the cyber risk is for companies. And that's any company that's on the internet today. So again, the critical deadlines, March 31st was for PCI DSS. There's common frameworks, there are common requirements such as MFA, continuous monitoring, there's vulnerability scans, and again, significant penalties. So non-compliance consequences can be incredibly disruptive to your business. We've actually seen businesses go out of business if they have some type of cyber attack and there were compliance requirements because of the fees and fines, they just can't afford them, so they fold. So we offer our expert partnership. Our managed compliance services provide the expertise, the tools, continuous oversight, the experience needed to navigate this complex regulatory landscape. So schedule a free assessment. You can contact us at info@iler.com. Our phone number is listed there as well. And between 9 a.m. 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, we will always answer live. And then if you want this compliance report that gives you more information, you can scan the QR code here or go to iler.com/compliance-report. So now I'm going to switch back and see if we have any questions. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. Again, there's a question mark option to go to. If you have something, please feel free to enter that in. I'll wait a minute and we'll keep this display up for our compliance report that you can download. And if no one has any questions in the next couple minutes, we'll go ahead and wrap up this. All right, so I do have one question. How often do these compliance requirements change? And that is a great question. I tried to mention that a little bit, but it depends on the frameworks. And so PCI DSS, they have major updates every 3 to 4 years, but really quarterly, they have guidance updates. And so that's where if you've been doing PCI DSS for any amount of time, you realize that you've got to go through a questionnaire quarterly and make sure that you are doing everything that they say you need to be doing. HIPAA does not come out that often for updates. They're rare major updates, but like in 2025, when that happened, it is now, and it is significant. NIST CSF, they've had every major revision every couple of years, but it's not, they have continuous minor updates. CIS controls, that's also updated every 2 to 3 years with iterative improvements. And FTC safeguards, the original FTC safeguards came out in the 80s. And so the ones relating to cybersecurity came out, it was just in, I believe, 2023. So that's been updated much more recently. And so that's updated basically on an as-needed basis as the threat landscape changes. All right, and I do not see any other questions. So I appreciate your time. Again, there'll be a recording of this video that'll be on our YouTube page, and we hope to see you in the future. So again, this was a part of our Buckeye Business Builders Monthly Lunch and Learn. We do a new topic that is the first Thursday of every month, And so you can find out more about that at the website bbbng.org. So next month's webinar is going to be given by Cynthia Gore of Stewart Title on everything related to titles for both residential and commercial titles. So I appreciate your time. Thanks for joining, and you have a great rest of your day.